So as I switch our PowerPoints, our next guest is Dr. Pierre Farid, who is the Chief Academic Officer of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. I am from Cleveland, so I'm particularly excited to have her here. Michelle is a dear friend and colleague who I've known for many years when we both worked in the District of Columbia Public Schools, as well as a person who I have watched her career and her work and admired greatly, and happens to be the CAO of a school district that is currently an ISA partner. You have her bio in front of you, but I will say that Michelle has been working very hard throughout her career to think about how to change the trajectory of traditionally underserved youth, and that she has really worked in many different elements of this field to deepen her own understanding. And I know that she is a person that who can help us think more deeply about what are the systems that we need to put in place, and how do we do this work in a way that is professionally supporting our educators and also changing the lives of the young people we serve. So with that, I'm going to invite Michelle to come up to the microphone.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm really honored to have this conversation with you all this morning about the journey that we've been on in Cleveland Metropolitan School District that really aligns to the ISA's thinking around like we can move children as quickly as possible so they can achieve their goals that they want in life, and that we're not creating the conditions that allows them to fail, but actually allows them to succeed. So, so one of the things that you will hear about with Cleveland is that we have actually been on this journey since 2012 with the Cleveland Plan. We actually went down to the State House and asked for legislation to help us with turning around our school district. It is actually called House Bill 525. And one of the things that it allowed us to do was to change some of the working conditions that we have in it, but also think about interesting pieces that we believe in around our children. So one is parent involvement. So in House Bill 525, we state that 100% of our parents need to have a conversation with their teachers by December 1st. We actually track that as a district. And we don't get to December 1st by having 100%, but through the whole school year, we actually get to 91% of our families having a deep conversation about learning with their scholars. Another interesting piece that was in House Bill 525 was around student advisories. We wanted to make sure that our scholars had a voice in what we needed in turnaround. And so quarterly, the CEO meets with 400 high school students to have discussions around what is working in our high schools, what is not working, and what can we do to improve upon it. So in the Cleveland Plan, it talks about promoting and expanding high-performing schools. We believe that every child deserves a high-performing school, whether it's a public school or even a charter school. So we do partner and sponsor some charter schools. Start new schools. How do we really think about what the world needs from our scholars and what type of high schools create that, or K-8 designs? Strengthening our mid-performing schools. And then last but not least, and this is the work that we will discuss today, repurpose low-performing schools. And so one of those key pieces was our investment schools. And so we have called our repurposing of our low-performing schools investment schools. So we did not want to label them in a negative way. We wanted to say, no, we're thinking about you. We want to invest in you. So we're investing in our scholars, we're investing in our families, and we're investing in our staff. So investment schools is unusual business. And so we try to think about what successful turnaround is and what is not. And we sometimes get caught up in both worlds sometimes, even in our journey. But we really thought about we have to name it. And so we have to say that our kids deserve better, and we as a district have to do that. And so sometimes people try to walk around eggshells, and we said, no, we're going to call this out, and that we have not served our children. And our CEO says that all the time. And then we have to think about supportive operating conditions. So you will hear some of the work that we did connected to House Bill 525 to support that. Working smarter, not harder. And so you hear some of the work around professional learning communities that ISA does with us. And I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive in a little bit later about working smarter and not harder. We know that our educators are really dedicated, but we have to figure out ways that they get the deep learning they need to support all of our scholars. And then a collaborative community, not only with our professional scholars, but also with our families. And so I will talk about that. So it really is a collaborative effort. And sometimes when you go into turnaround work, you want to do it by itself. So sometimes people are like, this is what I need to do, or you hear the Superman or Superwoman kind of analogy around someone coming in and making it happen. The last time I checked, there was only one Superman, and actually, a little known fact, Superman was started in Glenville High School. So the writers and the creators of the comic books actually were students of Glenville, or tar blooders. And so efforts to truly improve schools really take a collaborative effort. And so you hear that a lot with the ISA model about like, it can't just be the principal, it just can't be the teachers, it just can't be the scholars, it can't just be the family, it really is collaborative. And what we did was look at our academic progress teams, and those are our building leadership teams, worked over the summers to create corrective action plans. So in House Bill 525, we actually have something called corrective action plans. The CEO actually creates that, or his designee, which is me. And we then create these plans, but we then work with teams to discuss, like, how do you actually implement this? These are the key things that we want in our corrective action plans, like deep data dives every 2 weeks, having deep discussions with families. But what does that mean in your school? So we kept it at a very high level, and then we had them unpack it to kind of coordinate to what it meant in their school. So going back to what Stephanie shared around what great schools do to turn around, we looked at what 90-90-90 schools are. So 90% free and reduced lunch, and 90% minority students, but getting 90% student achievement. And you will see the alignment back to the ISA, and I will call it out actually later on, but we took this triangle and thought about readiness to learn. So what are the key needs of our scholars to make sure that they are really achieving at high levels? And you will see, again, this connection about the close adult and student relationships are truly, truly needed. And some people think like high school students don't want to be talked to, right? And they actually say those things, like, don't talk to me. But they actually really do want you to talk to them. They actually want you to ask them, like, what's going on in your life? Like, how do I support you? What do you need, right? And so we really take that to heart. We also really talked about addressing the challenges faced by students in living in poverty. Glenville is seated in one of our hardest hit. It was on the Bible Belt. Their mascot is called the Tar Blooders because they were the first areas on the train line coming from east to west. And so a lot of the people that worked there were putting in the ground the tracks. And so they would come home with blood and tar. So they are called the Tar Blooders. So they are a very hard-working community. But as you know, once the Rust Belt changed, that community lost all of it, right? And so there's a community that is driving for like success, but has been decimated. Every other block, you have houses that are abandoned, and kids have to walk through that. And so when you think about that, what does a high school student think about? Like, what are they striving for when their economy has collapsed and they don't have anything? The next part is readiness to teach. So the shared responsibility of achievement, that every adult in the building holds themselves accountable, that every scholar achieves. And that's hard when you sometimes have to have difficult conversations with adults around, like, you don't believe in what our kids are doing here. And so I've had many conversations in the Glenville community around the fact that, yes, my job as chief academic officer is to put college and career here. If our scholars decide they don't want to go to college, that is their choice, but they actually have to be prepared for college, and that is my job. So don't tell me these kids are not college bound. That's their choice, but what I have to put in front of them allows them to make that choice. So I'm not going to put curriculum in front of them that they will not be able to access college. I'm going to put curriculum in front of them that they can access college, be able to persist through college. And so some data points that we have received from our colleges this year was that 14% decrease in our students not being able to access level one college ready material once they go to college. So we're really excited that we're decreasing kids being off track once they get into college. Personalization of instruction, since our kids come in with so many needs, we say, how do we really meet them where they're at and understand their journey? And then readiness to act. This goes back to leadership and thinking about how to coach. And so we really talk about when you're doing this work, it's hard. And you have to deal with the turbulence of people saying, you're changing what I've been doing for 25 years. What do you mean what I'm teaching is not college readiness? And so leaders have to think about dealing with those components, and I'll go deeper in it. So with co-leaders, we thought differently about our high school. We actually created 2 principals at Glenville High School. So we had this co-leaders model because we also felt like we couldn't just make it happen with one leader. And one of our principals, Jackie Bell, focuses on culture. And then Sam Scavella, Dr. Scavella, focuses on instruction. And together they manage the building to really make change. But we really changed this thought about, oh, the conveyor belt, that schools just move along this way, and if we just put these little buckets in front of the kids, they will be great. And we actually tell the school teams, you're like the medical team. Like, as grade levels or vertical planning, you need to be sitting there and diagnosing the children and then saying, okay, so who's going to do this prescription and who provides the right supports and how do we wrap around and what's missing? You're like a medical team. So the kids are not just going through the conveyor belt, but it's actually when you go to a doctor and you've been diagnosed with cancer and you have 25 people that walk into a room and say, how do I help you? And that was a very different way of thinking for our schools, because they were just like, well, the kid failed, so what do you want me to do about it? And we're like, oh, that's your job. Your job is to figure out what to do so this scholar does not fail again. So a couple of other things that we tried to avoid was adding on to schools. We wanted things to be seamless. I can't say that we got it right off the first of the top of the bat. We really had to work on it numerous times, but we really tried to be intentional about our work. So even partnering with ISA was intentional. So we said we're not partnering with anyone that doesn't have these same beliefs around readiness to learn, readiness to teach, and readiness to act. We said, if you don't come in with that, we're not going to partner with you because we don't need to take our teachers and our professional educators off track. And as you can see how they align to what our beliefs were around turnaround work based on clear previous data on what turns around schools. We also put investment schools a part of a network, and they share best practices every month because it's hard. You're like, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Can you give me any feedback? And so we have step backs mid-year where people do a deep dive in what's successful and not. And then we have annual investment school institutes. So what's happening in my little Glenville? So when you look at our readiness to learn, there's a couple of things that we have done intentionally to really support our scholars and their families. One is a support for families. We actually have the Legal Aid Society in the Glenville school twice a week. And the reason why we heard was, sadly, like, our kids have issues that come up in their lives and they're like, so what do I do? And teachers don't know, like, the legal component, and they were like, well, who do we connect them with? Families were getting kicked out of their homes, and so when you get kicked out, you're like on the street, and they were like, who do we talk to, because I think my landlord shouldn't be kicking me out. Like, I paid my rent, I was 30 days late, but can they kick me out that quickly? Once again, the school didn't have answers for that. We're like, okay. And our CEO worked with the Legal Aid Society to have a deeper discussion with them, and now they're in the building twice a week so that families can come in, children can come in, and community members can come in just to have those discussions. We had a focus on attendance. Our kids came in when they wanted to. So you would come in at noon and they would be there for lunch. We're like, you weren't here in the beginning of the day. And we had discussions with them again, like, why aren't you coming? They said, it's boring in our class. No one cares about us. No one notices that I'm not here first thing in the morning. And so we have a Take 5 strategy, which is every adult in the building takes on 5 scholars, and they do check-ins with them about everything. So there's 5 things that they check in with them. So the 5 is what we keep focusing on. So they check in on their student achievement, like how are you doing with your classes? That's one. They check in with their behavior, what's going on in school. They check in on activities, like what excites you about learning. They check on relationships between adults. So if they're having a problem with a teacher, they can come to their Take 5 advisor and talk to them about, hey, this teacher's really mad at me, I don't know what to do. And then the other one is, what are other supports that you need? And so they Take 5 and they try to support them. And then we also try to strengthen our relationships and create a strong ninth grade cohort. So in Glenville, every grade level has different color shirts. And so that you can easily spot a ninth grader and you can be able to identify that they're in the wrong area of the building, and you can have a nice conversation, like, where are you supposed to be? And also because we wanted them to feel like a cohort. And so if you see, one of the other scholars not walking to school, but you see them in that shirt, like, you need to tell them, we are Tar Blooders, we're going to school on time. And we're really proud. The White House actually shared our best practices about the Take 5, because Glenville actually had a 10% increase in their on track for attendance in 1 year with this Take 5 strategy and creating this strong ninth grade cohort. The next part is focus on teaching and learning. So this piece connected to the ISA and the college prep teaching and learning was a part that we really focused on. So once again, when you think about Glenville, it was a place where kids technically back in the day went straight to the steel mills or working on the railroad. And so people always had this connotation like, these kids don't go to college. We need to change that thinking and really focus deeply on understanding the standards for college readiness. And one of the things that we did with our corrective action plan to allow the teachers to have a deeper dive was an 80-minute professional development time per day, and it was a part of their work schedule. So once again, we have a strong union in CMSD, but we work with the union to say, we want teachers to actually do homework coming into our 80-minute professional development. And they were like, well, if you put it a part of their schedule, technically they would have to do it. We're like, great. So that's what we did. And so we can give them work to do because, quote unquote, they are prepping for a class. Their class is their professional learning. Because what we had conversations with was like, I don't have time to plan like that. I don't have time to do this, right? And we said, okay, we heard you. How do we adapt to that? And we actually sat there and changed the schedule that this is a part of their professional responsibilities, and you will do homework to prep for the professional development time. It wasn't an easy sell in the beginning, but this is a picture of one of the examples. They really come together. They actually have boards where they check on every single scholar every time they come into the meeting to do that medical team model again and say, who knows Johnny? Johnny's off track today. Why? Does anyone know why? Let's talk about that. What are we going to do? And then they have a component around deep understanding of the college readiness. So I am teaching Algebra 1 and I have to do this skill. I'm really struggling. What does that look like? And creating these opportunities for teachers to have deep discussions among themselves. And when you talk to the Glenville staff, in the beginning, they hated coming. I can't believe you're treating us like children. And now they like rush to their professional development time and to have these deeper discussions. The next part was readiness to act. And so we focused on leadership again and really talking to what is the continuous improvement that the ISA talks through. And so they have an improvement cycle, which is plan, do, check, and act, which they do as a leadership team every week. They do 4-week data assessments to make sure that kids are on track every 4 weeks to reaching their goals. They do daily classroom visits to make sure that their teachers are implementing what they talked about in the 80-minute professional development. They give them immediate feedback. If a teacher needs more support, they sit there and pull them so that they can work on it. The other part that I want to say is that we actually had to work with our labor management unions. And so I think sometimes as school districts, we like, oh, we got to move forward. And we really worked with our unions to have deeper discussions about what does this mean for you. We talked to like our secretaries about you need to have good relationships with our families. Here are things that you should say when they walk into your building. Here's ways that you de-escalate a mama that's upset. And the union was like, we don't do education. We do X, Y, and Z. We're cleaners. We're this. And we're like, no, it takes a whole community to bring about change. And so we are putting into our corrective action plans what secretaries need to do, what cleaners need to do, how you connect back to readiness to learn, to make sure that our scholars feel good. Our kids come through security. What do security officers say to our scholars when they walk in? Do they say, welcome, we're happy to see you, we missed you yesterday? Or they like, keep it moving, keep it moving? Like, we wanted to change those language so that our scholars heard positivity as soon as they walked in. We also have wraparounds, so we have community partners. We actually have a lead agency. We work with the United Way. Every single one of our investment school has a lead agency that partners with them. So Guidestone is a mental health agency that leads that work. For Glenville, they felt that they needed mental health support for our scholars, and so the lead agency was selected. And we had a community group apply for it. They got selected, and then they work with us continuously. We also held community meetings at each of our investment schools, and we did not lead it as a school system. We actually found neighborhood led community groups to do the conversations with our families, teachers, and scholars. Because we knew that they would either just yell at us for an hour that our schools suck, or they wouldn't tell us the deep stuff that was going on in our buildings. And so we were just there as listeners. We conducted 2-hour-long meetings. We had focus questions for our families and our scholars, and they really gave us really clear feedback on what is happening and what's not. And then we use that feedback into the corrective action plans. Like, our family said, I don't know when my child is off track. And so in our corrective action plans, we talk about continuous communications with families. The school gets to choose what that continuous communication looks like, but you have to have that. That's a non-negotiable in our corrective action plans. Scholars talked about like positive language with us. Like, they didn't know the language to say, but they're like, can teachers just be nice to us? And so we talked about what words do we use with our scholars when they're struggling? We know they're coming in with a lot, so what do we need to do? So like, all of our teachers stand at the door when they greet our scholars during the passing class. And like, what do you say to them? Like, say something positive. And those little things matter to our children. So we've gotten positive press about it for all of our schools, about like the work is changing. Former Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan came to visit our schools because of the investment school strategy. Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. So I can't tell you this journey has ended. We are just still at the beginning parts of our journey, but are we figuring out what's best for scholars? Yes. Do we still have a long way to go? Yes. We believe that 100% of our scholars can graduate in 4 or 5 years, and we're not there yet. But looking at Glenville, we're really proud. Once again, they are projected to have a 10% graduation increase on their 17-18 school year report card. In just 1 year, they have increased kids graduating on time in 4 years. They created this male achieving leadership through excellence, and really having people come in and work with our scholars. So once again, going back to that readiness to learn, the collaborative relationships and building relationships, they created this. And we're really proud of this piece. They just were announced by the Ohio Department of Education by winning the Momentum Award. Out of 100 schools in Cleveland, only 2 schools won that award, and only 1 high school, and that was Glenville. And they won that because they received a value add of A for every single value add group. So our special ed group had a value add of A. Our lowest performing subgroup of 20% had a value add of A. Our increase in graduation rate was a value add of A. And to get an A means you have far exceeded the expectations of scholars in the state of Ohio. So to be a value add of C just means that you met it. Value add of B is like a tad bit better, but value add of A out of 602 districts really means that they work their tails off to sit there and make changes for the scholars at Glenville, which we're so proud of. So We are the investment school, so we hope that you are all in.